Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello students, welcome to TV learning program. My name is Benon. I will be with Senior 4 students in biology. Dear students, you are welcome. I'm very happy to be with you in this lesson. And I request you to have your pen and book. Actively participate in this lesson. That means follow all the steps of the lesson. And then at the end of the lesson, you will test your level of understanding because I will give you homework. Dear students, how do we call a group of cells together? How do we call a group of cells joined together? Excellent. It's a tissue. A tissue is a group of similar cells which are specialized to perform a particular function. That is excellent. Now, our lesson today is from Unit 5, which is Diversity of Specialized Tissues. And the lesson is Epithelial Tissues. By the end of this lesson, make sure you are able to identify different types of epithelial tissues, location of epithelial tissues in the body, and their functions. So before we start, here we see the term specialized tissues. There is term specialization and then tissues. When we talk about specialization, that means you concentrate on what you can do best, then you leave other things to other people. Even here, specialized tissues are tissues which have similar traits or characteristics that allow them to perform particular functions. Here we say we have cells, and these cells will join together to form a tissue. So our concern today is about the term tissue. Specialized tissues. That means these tissues have particular functions in our body. So the lesson is epithelial tissues. Dear students, tissues are composed of cells which are similar in structure and are specialized to perform specific functions in our body. Meaning tissues have specific functions. Then, in the human body, we have 4 general types of tissues. We have what we call epithelial tissues for lining body cavities, covering internal organs and large surfaces. That means epithelial tissues are found lining different body cavities, covering internal organs and other large surfaces of the body. That is one type of tissues we find in our body. We also find there connective tissues. These connective tissues link organs or other tissues together, and they are specialized to provide protection, to store fat, and even to provide circulatory function in cardiovascular system. Connective tissues, which are responsible for protection, to store fats, or even to provide circulatory function in cardiovascular system. Then we also have the third type of tissues we find in our body. We have muscular tissues. These muscular tissues are responsible for contraction and relaxation in the body surfaces. That means when there is contraction and relaxation, there is movement of an organism from one place to another. Then we have nerve tissues. Nerve tissues are responsible for transmission of nerve impulses from one part of the body to another. These nerve tissues are found in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. So, which means in our body, we have 4 different types of tissues. We have said epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissues, and nerve tissues. Our concern today is about epithelial tissues, or epithelium when it is one. These, we find them covering of the body surfaces and internal organs and lining body cavities. Students, do you understand when we talk about body cavities? These are internal parts of the body that have open holes. Take an example, your pharynx or the throat, your windpipe or trachea, and others, those are body cavities. So we find there epithelial tissues lining them. Then we have major tissue components of glands. We always have free surface exposed to an open space, and basement membrane usually anchored to connective tissue. This is another trait which describes a connective tissue. Then we have, they lack blood vessels, so nourishment comes from underlying connective tissue by the process of diffusion. Other unique characteristics of epithelial tissues are they reproduce rapidly. Cells in the epithelial tissues are often attached to one another by desmosomes. Desmosomes, these ones are structures that can connect cells together. Because remember, a tissue is a group of cells. Now, let us talk about classification of covering epithelium. Here you can see we have epithelium, which is divided into simple epithelium and stratified epithelium. When we talk about simple epithelium, we have what we call squamous, cuboidal, columnar, and pseudo-stratified. That means we can say simple squamous epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Then we have what we call stratified epithelium, where we have what we call squamous, cuboidal, columnar, and transition, which means we can say stratified squamous epithelium, stratified cuboidal epithelium, stratified columnar epithelium, stratified transition epithelium. When it comes to squamous, we have what we call keratinized and non-keratinized. That means the one which is keratinized, it has keratin. Keratin is a protein we find in our hair, the body hair. We can find it in the nails. We can also find it in the skin. And it is very important because it works as waterproof. So those are different types of epithelial tissues, and we are going to see one by one and where we can find them in the body as well as their functions. Before we continue, let us understand some of the simple terms we are going to meet. There is word simple, which means single layer. Where you see the word simple, just understand it is a single layer. Then when we meet the word stratified, just know that it means multiple layers. And then when it comes to the shape of cells which make these tissues, we have the term squamous. Squamous means flattened. That means cells will be flat. When we talk about cuboidal, it means cube-shaped. The cells will have the shape of a cube. Then when we talk about columnar, that means elongated. So if you need to understand these epithelial tissues, you have to master those terms. Simple means a single layer. Stratified means multiple layer. Then squamous means flat cells. Cuboidal means cube-shaped. Columnar means elongated. So if you have mastered those key terms, Let us go step by step describing different types of epithelial tissues. Let us start with what we call simple squamous epithelium. That means if there is word single, that means it is a single layer. If there is word squamous, that means cells are thin. That means simple squamous epithelium, it means a single layer of thin and flattened cells found in areas where diffusion or filtration occurs. That means we can find simple squamous epithelium in air sacs of lungs. Remember, lungs have what we call air sacs or alveoli. These are small functional units of lungs, which are very many in numbers and small in size, as well as having large surface area for diffusion of gases in and out. So in the air sacs, we find there simple squamous epithelium. Then we have these cells in the kidney tubules. Remember, kidneys have what we call nephrons. And these nephrons have different tubules. Like we have proximal convoluted tubules, we have distal convoluted tubules, and in there, we find there simple squamous epithelium. Then we have capillary wall. Remember, we have capillaries in our body, which are blood vessels. There we find simple squamous epithelium. We can also find simple squamous epithelium in the lining blood vessels, which we call endothelium. That means we say endothelium because they are inside blood vessels. Epithelium are outside, and then endothelium are inside. So inside blood vessels, we find there endothelium. Remember, the main functions of these epithelial tissues, we can talk about secretion, we can talk about absorption, we can talk about protection, we can talk about diffusion, and lubrication. These epithelial tissues are very important in the following. Secretion. Remember, secretion is the production of useful substances which are needed by the body. And then there's also absorption, which is selecting useful nutrients. Then there's also protection. These epithelial tissues protect those internal organs of the body. Then the diffusion, which is the movement of molecules from the region of high concentration to the region of low concentration, as well as lubrication, preventing dryness. So these epithelial tissues are there for those functions. Let us see another type of epithelial tissues. Here you can see we have different diagrams which show different epithelial tissues. Here we have simple and stratified. When we talk about simple, you can see here we have simple squamous. Remember, when we say simple, it means one layer. If we say squamous, it means flat. Like you see, this one is a tissue because a tissue is made up of cells. You can see these are different cells. And then, as you see, it is made up of one layer, that is simple, and then the cells are flat. That's why we say it is simple squamous. Then these cells are attached to what we call basolamina, or this basolamina, we can even call it basement membrane. Then we have what we call simple cuboidal. If it is simple, that means it is made up of one layer, and then cuboidal because cells are cube-shaped. Like you see, these cells are in cube form. Then when it comes to simple columnar, columnar means elongated. That means there is Simple means single layer. You can see this is a single layer. And then these cells are elongated, as you can see them. So that's why we say simple columnar. Then we have what we call pseudo-stratified. Pseudo, that means false. When you see these cells, you may think that these are many layers. But in actual sense, it is just one layer where cells are attached to basolamina or basement membrane. Then when it comes to stratified, that's where we see multiple layers. 2, 3, or more than 3 layers. Like you see here, this is a layer, this is another layer, this is another layer. So stratified squamous, that means many layers, flat cells. This is stratified squamous. Then this one is keratinized stratified squamous. That means when you see on top, this is keratin, and keratin is a protein we have talked about, which we find in hair, skin, and our nails. You can see it is stratified because we can see many layers of cells, and then on top we have keratin. This keratin is very important, and we can find this type of epithelial tissues in the palm of our hands or in the sole of our feet. And the function of this keratin is to work as a waterproof. Then we have stratified columnar. If you see, these are different layers, and then cells are elongated. That's why we say columnar. Then here we have stratified cuboidal, which means cells are arranged in different layers, as you can see. This is a layer, this is another layer, and then as you see, these cells are cuboidal in shape. Then we have what we call transitional. You can see these are cells, and then they are in different layers which are not clear. So these are different types of epithelial tissues. And now you have understood what the term simple means, what the term stratified means, squamous, columnar, and cuboidal. Remember, we are talking about tissues, and a tissue is a group of similar cells which are specialized to perform a particular function. Then let's continue. We have what we call simple cuboidal epithelium. Simple, that means single layer of cube-shaped cells because they are cuboidal. These are found in areas of secretion and absorption. Simple cuboidal epithelium is found in kidney tubules and duct glands. These duct glands here, we can talk about exocrine glands. Students, do you know what exocrine glands mean? Exocrine glands. These are glands which have ducts, what we call ducts. These are channels or pathways where secretions or substances produced pass. When we talk about exocrine glands, we can give examples. Let us say salivary gland, the one which produces saliva. That one is exocrine gland. Let us talk about sweat gland, which produces sweat when we are working. That is exocrine gland. Let us talk about tear gland or lacrimal gland, which produces tears. That is another exocrine gland. Let us talk about sebaceous gland, which produces sebum, which is very important in our skin. It's another important exocrine gland. Let us talk about prostate gland. That is another exocrine gland. So those glands have simple cuboidal epithelium. Then we have another one which is called simple columnar epithelium. That means simple means one layer, columnar it means cells are elongated. So we say a single layer of elongated cells designed for protection, secretion, and absorption. Where can we find simple columnar epithelium? in the uterus of female reproductive system and in the small intestine. Remember, small intestine is part of digestive system. Some columnar cells have finger-like projections which we call microvilli. And the function of microvilli is to increase the surface area for absorption. Then we have pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Pseudo, that means false stratification, where these are not main layers, but just one layer. These ones are very important. They have hair-like protein substances which are called cilia, and the function of cilia is to trap and expel foreign particles or bacteria. They may be used to propel egg in the uterine wall or tubes, and these pseudostratified columnar epithelium are found in the trachea, upper respiratory tract, or they can be found in the uterine tubes. You can see they have cilia, and the function of cilia is to trap dust particles or bacteria so that they don't go in the lungs. So this cilia is very important. Then we have stratified squamous epithelium. That means many layers of flattened cells. Because we have talked about stratified, many layers. Squamous, that means cells are flat. Cells at the bottom are youngest and cuboidal shaped, and they will become flattened as they move upward to higher layers. Where can we find stratified squamous epithelium? We can find them in the skin layer, the outermost layer of the skin, which we call epidermis. We can find them lining in the oral cavity, that means in the mouth, or in the throat or pharynx. That's where we can find stratified squamous epithelial tissues. Remember, these tissues are responsible for protection, absorption, secretion, lubrication, and diffusion. Then we have stratified cuboidal epithelium. That means it has 2 or 3 layers, cube-shaped cells, and it is responsible for protection. These are found in sweat glands, salivary glands, and pancreas. Then we have stratified columnar epithelium. This is made up of elongated cells which are located in the vas deferens. This is part of male reproductive system, urethra, and pharynx. Then we have, lastly, transition epithelium. There are many layers of cube-shaped elongated cells. Like you have seen, those cells were cube-shaped and they are elongated. These are important in dispensability and protection. Where can we find transition epithelial tissues? We can find them lining the urinary bladder. Remember, bladder is part of urinary system, where we talk about kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. Then transitional epithelium is found in the bladder. It can also be found in the ureter and urethra. All these are organs of urinary system. Dear students, we have been talking about epithelial tissues. We have first defined the term tissue, where we have seen that a tissue is a group of similar cells which are specialized to perform a particular function. We have seen that in the human body, we have 4 different types of tissues. We have talked about epithelial tissues. We have talked about connective tissues. We have talked about other 2 different types of tissues, which you have understood. And then, before we wind up our lesson today, let us discuss or share the homework to test your level of understanding. Question number 1, define a tissue. Question number 2, explain functions and location of the following tissues in our body. A, simple squamous epithelium. B, simple columnar epithelium. C, stratified squamous epithelium. D, stratified columnar epithelium. E, simple cuboidal. Those are different questions you are going to do to test your level of understanding. Remember, when we talk about simple, we mean one layer. When we talk about squamous, we mean flattened cells. When we talk about stratified, we mean multiple layers. When we talk about columnar, we mean elongated cells. Then when we talk about cuboidal, we mean cube-shaped cells. So make sure you have mastered those terms. Dear students, thank you very much for your active participation. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of the day.